Alright guys, welcome to our snow day class. So we're going to be going over lesson 6-ish from our book. I'm going to be going over it a little bit differently because I'm not entirely keen on how they go through things. Before we open that though, there's a couple of terms I want to go over because this lesson isn't really about new tools, really. It's about teaching you how certain things interact with each other in After Effects. So we have to look at the relationships between different kinds of layers, different kinds of compositions. All right. So you guys have all dealt with grouping before, either in Flash or Illustrator, maybe even in a 3D program, right? So you have a bunch of different things, right? You got a bunch of different drawings and drawing elements, and you want them all to be treated similarly. You want to be able to move them all around because they're all going to be making up, I don't know, the eyeball of your character, and you don't want to have to deal with them separately, so you group them, right? You just throw them in a group. And when they're within the group, what that means is that you can move them all around at once, you can scale them, but if you want to, you can still go in and you can make whatever changes you want to. So you can, say, all right, now, yeah. There we go. So you can go back in, you can make changes to things individually, but they still act within the group. One key thing about the group is that they're equal. There's no there's no like this one's more important than these two, this one controls these two. There's nothing like that going on in a group. Parenting is the opposite. So parenting involves you have an object of some sort, right? And let's see, we've got another object. All right, and I've put one lower on this space for a reason. This object tells that object what to do. This is the parent, this is the child, right? Now, one of the key things about a parent-child relationship is that the child can still move independently. So the child can move to the left, move to the right, turn circles, do whatever it wants. Parent doesn't move. Think of it like a dog on a leash. But when you pull the leash, when the parent decides, okay, I'm going to go this way, the child has to go that exact same amount that way. Another way to look at it is if you can move your hand and the rest of your arm doesn't have to move. But if you bend your elbow, your hand doesn't have a choice. It has to follow. It has to go with because of the way it's attached to your arm. And in fact, next week we're going to be getting into parenting, for use with something like cutouts. At least we'll get into it briefly. All right. So that's the deal with parenting. Here, nothing's in charge. Here, there is one thing in charge. Now, also with parenting, you can have multiple children for one parent. Also, a child can be the parent of another thing, right? So this is going to tell this what to do. And I should have used a different color. So you can have a hierarchy that keeps going and going. It's not just step 1 and step 2. Right, there we go. So this triangle is the parent of the square. So that means the square is a child. But the square is also the parent of this diamond. So something can be both a child and a parent. And hierarchy can just keep keep going. If you have a rig in 3D, you're going to have, probably 25 different levels within your hierarchy. After Effects won't get that to be that much. All right, so that's grouping versus parenting. After Effects doesn't really have much in the way of grouping. It just has the parenting. All right, so I'm in the wrong folder, of course. There we go. So I said we're doing lesson 6. So you go into lesson 6 and you look and there you don't see project files because they have everything buried into these folders. Why? Well, because they made them all separate project files. I think this has something to do with them wanting to make things less confusing. They didn't succeed. This is more confusing. So we're just going to open up the first one, parenting. Right, we're going to start from there. There we are. We're going to start from there, and we're going to start with parenting 1 starter. And you're going to see that there's 3 layers. First layer is actually locked because it's just this background video of lines spinning around. And then there's a planet. And then there's this text on a circle. It says ground control to Major Tom. How timely. So we want to be able to, maybe move the globe and the text follows with it. We don't want to have to, copy and paste keys. We just want to move one, the other moves with it. So down here with all your crazy layer stuff, all your switches, you have to click somewhere on the column, right? Right click, columns, and we have to open up parent because that's not usually open by default. And what it says is parent, and right now none is listed because none of these things has a parent. For text on a circle though, I want the planet to be the parent. So I can say, instead of none, I can say planet. Now what happens is if I select the planet, which really should be above text on a circle, frankly. If it's going to be the parent and you want to be able to select it easily, it kind of needs to be there. But you see I select planet and both layers follow. I could rotate this. If I bring up rotation, right, that'll rotate it. But I can move this independently, right? So the child can move independently all at once, but if the parent moves, the child has to follow. All right, so we've got the text on a circle parented to the planet. That's the terminology. If something's parented to something, it is the child of something. But now watch what happens when I move the planet. Watch these numbers down here. Nothing happens. These numbers refer to where this layer is relative to the layer it's parented to. If I think if I turn this off, yeah, see how those numbers change? Those position numbers change? Because they're referring to this layer, to the planet layer, not to the whole composition. So you can parent something, and then when you change this, you're changing how these things are related to each other, not its absolute value within the composition. Same with the rotation. I can say rotate relative to the planet. A better example of this, if I turn off parenting for a second, might be if I wanted this whole circle to rotate around the planet. I know that sounds weird, right? So I'm actually going to shrink that a little bit so we can see it. There we go. So let's say I want these words to spin in a circle like this, but I also want that spinning circle to rotate around the planet. So I kind of need 2 different rotations, right? So what I can do is I can parent this to the planet, and I can key rotation on the planet. So I'm just going a little bit further and doing about 1 rotation. There we go. Ish. And then on the actual text layer, I can key rotation, but that's going to rotate the text layer itself. There we go. And so what you get is this. Oh, I went in the wrong direction, so it's it doesn't look like it's working correctly. We're gonna go in the opposite direction. -2. There it is. That should look like it's spinning the way I want it to. What on earth? It is rotating, but it's an optical illusion. It doesn't look like it's rotating. Because I didn't go to the... I have 2 keys right here. See? This is why you have to be careful about where you put your time marker, because that's my original one and that's my fix, and I needed to change the original one, not to add the fix. So now I just got to spin it way more. -5. Of course, it would help if I previewed where I actually put the end. There it is. All right, that's what we want. So the child is spinning around its own axis point, and then the globe is causing it to rotate around itself. So you've got, right, it's rotating around 2 different points. This is a little bit trippy. I won't play this much longer. And to further complicate matters, I could also key the position. So I could bring this down here at the start and bring it up here to end. And because it's got to go all the way, there we go. Because the text is tied to the planet, I only had to, change the position of the planet, and the text is going to follow it, right? So that's the general idea between parents and children. If the parent moves, the child has to move. There's no choice. But if the child wants to move independently, it can. Now, I've got all this animation. I'm just going to get rid of it just to simplify things a little bit. There's the other one. So, one thing you want to make sure of before you parent stuff together is that these things are where you want them to be relative to each other, right? So, I can parent it and then, alter this a little bit. But what you don't want to do is parent these, add animation, and then say, well, actually, I wish this was in a slightly different spot. Then you start to run into problems where it's going to potentially change how things look. The other thing is that, remember, once it's parented, this parent can't move without the child moving. So let's say the child is in the right spot, but, I need the parent to be over to the left further. You got to move both. You have to move the parent over here and then move the child back over here. So you really want to, whenever I parent stuff, I put stuff where I want it to be or where I think I want it to be, and then I run tests. I don't, just jump right into, this is my animation. I sit here and I start, is this not parented? Oh, wrong number. 82 times around is, there we go. Right? I test it, to look at this. I test it to look at position. Is this moving the way I think it should? Is it going to scale the way I think it should? Right? Run tests and then say, oh no, you know what? This should be closer or whatever. It should be smaller. Like, you want to establish how these things are going to work together before you start turning on stopwatches and adding keyframes, because once you start doing that, changing the relationship between each other, it's possible, but you could blow up your whole animation. Especially when you have anchor points that are no longer in the center of things. Alright, so, by the way, opacity, let me bring that up for a second, not part of parenting. This part is always independent. Rotation, scale, and position are the things that deal with parents. Anchor points, obviously, they each have their own anchor point. And opacity is always going to be separate. If you wanted to change opacity on a bunch of things at the same time, there is a way to do it. It's just not with parenting. Alright, so hopefully that makes sense. And like I said, next following week, we're going to go over a little bit more to do with parenting in terms of its relationship to cutouts and things like that. Alright, back to Photoshop. New lesson. This one gets a little bit weird. So, in After Effects, let me turn this stuff on. There we go. So, I've shown you in After Effects before, you can have multiple compositions, right? You can have multiple sort of little projects existing within one larger project. There's 2 more in here. There's also, you can have multiple movies, backgrounds, etc. It's a little bit weird because it's kind of like having multiple Photoshop files open in the same Photoshop file, but think of it as the project is your one giant overarching holder of all your project, and you have multiple shots within that project. All right, but imagine, just kidding, imagine all of these squares are different assets, right? And the green one is your main composition. And this orange one is a different composition, right? I've been making two different compositions, two different things that I'm working on in After Effects. And I need to put this one and this one. It's literally that easy. You can put a composition inside another composition, and it's just called nesting. Just a technical term for a type of thing that's inside the other thing. Technically, all of your assets are, I guess, nested in a composition, but it refers to comps inside other comps. And it really is just a matter of taking it from your project panel and dragging it down to the timeline exactly the same as you put in movies and stills and music and everything else. It can exist very happily inside a composition, and in fact, getting really good stuff out of After Effects will often involve nested comps, right? So there could be a whole bunch of different images and videos in here that you need to control in a certain way, right? That's one way to control everything all at once. Maybe you need them all to turn off simultaneously, visually speaking, and you don't want to have to sit there and do that 18 times for your 18 layers. You put them all in their own composition, put that in a larger composition, whether it's longer timeline or just larger visually, and then you can manipulate them all at the same time. All right, pre-comping is the inverse of this. These things here are assets, video, audio, etc. And for some reason, I need to control them together, right? I need them to be in their own comp, independent of this green one right here. So how do I do that? Well, pre-comping is taking these three assets and putting them into their own composition, right? After the fact. They're already in the bigger overall composition. I need a middleman. I need a new middleman put in. Now, technically speaking, you could actually accomplish this by taking these three things, cutting them, pasting them into a new composite, like making a new composition, pasting them in there, and then nesting, you know, like taking the comp and nesting it in the other comp. You can do that. But pre-comping is just, it's like a one less step, basically. So I'm going to show you how that works. But both of these are the same. The end result is you have a larger comp, and then you have a smaller comp inside it. It's the exact same thing. So I want to show you how that works. Let's see here. So we're going to make a new comp just to kind of make things less confusing. So we're going to go composition, new composition, larger comp. And I'm going to make this the same size we've been making sort of everything, HDV, HDTV, just because I know it's bigger than the one I'm going to throw in it. All right, and it's 12 seconds long, which I think is good. I'm going to hit OK. So this is my larger composition, right? But I need this little globe thing I've been working on to be in here. So I just click it and I drag it in here. That's it. Nested composition. And I can sit here and I can move this one here. Maybe I want like multiple videos in this, right? It shows up, you know, it says right here composition, and it's got a lot of, you can parent it to other layers. Here, I can bring in parenting 2 for some reason. There we go, 2 of them side by side. It has all the same transforms as any other layer, position, scale. This is a raster program. If you have a composition with raster elements in it, you don't want to go more than 100%, right? So these are raster elements, meaning bitmaps, meaning pixel, 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 pixel. So you don't want to grow this larger than this. It will start to look like crap really fast. See? Back to 100. All right, but each of these layers has its own transforms. You can turn off visibility if you wanted to. If there was sound, you could turn that on and off or manipulate it. The one thing you can't do from here is manipulate the individual layers. But that's easy. If you want to get back into this composition, you can just double click on it, right? Now, if you're thinking, wow, this is kind of like navigating through flashes symbols, you're not wrong. It shows up here that you're inside this composition, which is residing inside this composition. And if you want to get back out to the larger one, you just click there. I don't think, I know in the other program, yeah, you can't just double click on the background. You have to actually go up here and navigate. But it's the same for this comp. Oh, I want to double click here. And what's nice is if you move the time marker to 2 seconds in and then you go back out to your larger comp, you saw the time marker move, but technically it didn't. It's still at 2 seconds in. It's just that this is a longer composition. So your time marker will be tied to, it'll be in sync. So if you want to see what happens at 7 seconds in, and then you're like, I wonder how that looks in the main composition. You go back out to the main comp, and it's still at 7 seconds. So they're in sync with each other, which is nice. It is a little trippy. You might have to go inside here, change the timing, come back out here, see how everything works together, and then go, not quite. I have to move it over just a little bit. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot of back and forth. Yeah, welcome to animation and compositing and filmmaking. That, I know I usually say in After Effects, if it takes a long time, you're doing it wrong. That's only for tedious, ticky-tacky work. Working out the timing of your animation is not ticky-tacky work. That will always take a lot of time, right? All right, so that's nesting a composition. Easy peasy. Pre-composing is a little bit different. And to show it to you, I actually want to bring in one of the other example projects. But hang on, I just want to check the recording. Yes, it's working. So, example projects. I want to bring it into here, though. I don't want to, have you guys working with several different files. So, step 1, because we are working with CS6 and we are on CC, we are going to save. And we're going to, instead of calling this blob, whatever this says, we're going to call it Benvenuto, because we put our names on everything. Lesson 6, actually 06, because some of these are double digits. So this is going to be my overall